and welcome back to Prep Talk Podcast. I'm your host Vartika Bhandari and we are back with another episode. Well, this episode is very different from the ones that we've done till now because in this episode we have a counselor with us to help students understand the entire process of studying abroad and what are the essentials that every student and parent should be aware about before they start the process of abroad education. To introduce our host, we have with us Nistha Tripathi, who is currently the founder of 24 North Star. She has done some amazing work in the counseling segment of studying of abroad education. She has helped over 750 students with their abroad education journey and get them admitted to universities such as MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and more. She's an active career coach, so you know you are in good hands with the information she imparts with us today. So, after a long introduction, let's get started with the podcast. Hi, Nishta. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Vartika. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So, for our first question, for students who are considering studying abroad, what are the key factors that they should consider when they are starting their journey and selecting a country or a university to finalize?
Okay, so let's talk about selecting the country first because I think
Mhm.
that's usually the first thing that comes to the parents' mind, right?
Right.
Um, so, first of all, interestingly, we are seeing an increasing interest in undergrad study abroad among Indian families. And
Right.
I believe that has also to do with, like, a lot of Indians are very successfully settled in these countries and they are doing extremely well. Like, according to a study, Indian Americans are the most successful ethnic group in USA, and on
Mhm.
an average, these families are earning, like, 100,000 US dollars per year, which is a substantial amount. So when we see that, like, Indian Americans are doing so well, that encourages a lot more families in India to also pursue that dream. And I was talking about US. The same is a situation in other countries. I mean, we know the UK Prime Minister has Indian roots as well,
Right.
right? So yes, we have seen an increasing interest in here, and I think one of the big factors which you see in undergrad consideration as opposed
Mhm.
to graduate is the support system.
Mhm.
So families tend to prefer, like, countries where they already have an existing social support system. They could have their relatives in there. They could have close
Mhm.
friends in there because people going for undergrad education are still at a very tender age, and it's
Mhm.
recommended, or parents are concerned about, like, having that kind of social and family support for their kids. So that becomes an important consideration. But apart from that, I think definitely financial consideration is one of the important things because the cost can vary a lot between different countries. I mean, we have US and UK on the higher end on one side, and we can have something lower, like Singapore is somewhere in between. Australia is a good option coming up these days. So in
Mhm.
between, I think 6 countries we are seeing a lot of interest in these days. That is US, UK, Canada, Germany, Singapore, and Australia. So this is what most of the Indian families look at. Another factor becomes of, like, your career prospects. Like, if you really want to work in US, then it's highly recommended that you study in US.
Right. So you are, aware about the culture and how the corporate system actually works.
Right.
Right. So you have done your education from US yourself, right?
Right.
So what were the things that took away that drive students towards US more rather than choosing to study in India?
Sure. So I spent 7 years in US.
Right.
I spent most of my 20s in there. So I
Mhm.
went for my master's in computer science, and I studied at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, which is the top fifth ranked CS university in the world. And then I worked on Wall Street for a couple of years, and then I joined the MBA program at New York University. And then
Mhm.
I joined few startups in the business roles. So I've had the privilege of studying both technical as well as business courses in US, and I've also worked in technical capacity, technical roles in Wall Street, and also in the business side roles in New York startups. So having seen that wide spectrum, I think one thing that really attracts me about US is the kind of opportunities that are available. They, like, far exceed what you can get in other countries. The kind of salaries you can get far exceeds, I think it's at least 1.5 times than what you can get anywhere else in the world. So it's actually, like, very conducive to saving and getting rich quickly, to be honest.
Mhm.
So the kind of lifestyle you can afford in US, is more lucrative than, like, what you can afford in other countries. So I think, and that is the one reason when we have seen Indian Americans doing so well in US, like it's much easier to buy a Mercedes or BMW or buy a much bigger house in US in those salaries, as opposed to in some other countries like India. So that is one thing. Apart from that, I think English speaking culture, and US is very open to, international students. Like if you
Hmm.
see in master's programs, at least international students form a huge percentage, and they're very well accepted in the community. So in terms of racial bias also, I would say US is slightly better than some other countries, let's say Europe, etc., that we see. And overall, I think thriving Indian community in these countries means you can get a lot of social and cultural support. There are Indian groups everywhere. So I think US like genuinely feels more welcoming to Indians in that aspect. So I think and for foreseeable future, like as we see, most of the tech big companies are there, most of the innovation is happening in US, so it will remain our attractive destination, I would say.
Right, right. Very well said. So, talking about the cultural difference for an Indian student studying and living in India with their parents, and then talking about them totally transitioning to a Western country where you don't have your parents, you don't have support from the family, right? You are all on your own. So, how would you emphasize that student research and understand the culture of the country that they are going to settle, or maybe be in for the next 4 to 5 years for the academics, and the interest, how can they develop their interest in that particular country?
Right. So social life is very, very important, as you rightly said, because ultimately, otherwise, we start seeing a lot of mental health issues or
Mhm.
cases of depression if the student is not able to adapt to
Mhm.
that particular place, and especially when it's so far away from home, right? So in these situations, I highly recommend that, do visit the country you are planning to apply to, do
Mhm.
get a sense of what the life is like there before you decide to spend your 4 very critical years. Those are very tender
Right.
years in undergraduate education, right? So you don't want to jump into something which is completely a strange land for you. So
Mhm.
that's why we see, and a lot of our clients also do, they visit these countries, they attend a summer program, they even visit the campuses of some of the colleges to get a sense of like how close knit is the student community, how
Mhm.
supportive is the staff there, what are the
Mhm.
safety issues. For example, we do hear of safety concerns sometimes, even in US, like the gun shooting can be a big point of concern among parents, right?
Mhm.
And in Canada, it can be very cold weather and depressing at times, for example. So
Mhm.
it's important that you visit these places, get a sense of how your kid is liking the environment, and whether again there is other family or social support, because in case he falls sick or in case there is an emergency, is there somebody to take care of that or not? So these are the factors which should be very, very carefully considered before choosing any country. That's why some people are preferring Singapore also these days, because it's very close to India.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So, talking about the main components of the college application process. So, for in international students, how does it is it different from the domestic applications?
Yeah, it's so different, it's not even funny sometimes. And people like get really shocked when they see the depth of the profile that we look at for undergrad applications. So even
Mhm.
as compared to, I would say, graduate application is still far more simpler than undergraduate applications. So one primary difference is, in India we are used to very much the competitive exam mindset, right?
Mhm.
From day one, we know that we have to clear some exam to get what we want. But it's completely opposite when you apply to these universities abroad, because they don't evaluate you on just a performance of one test. They like to see a holistic profile, and there are so many components in there. It's your, of course, your academic grades matter a lot, but also the rigor of your coursework. Like, if you have taken advanced coursework, if you're just taking basic courses kind of thing, then your test scores are there, as you guys know. So academic profile is one thing. Then they also like to see the talent part of it. And
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by talent is like, have you pursued any activity in depth? What do you do when out of choice? Like, outside your academic responsibilities, what activities do you like to engage in? So, somebody having pursued their interest in music in greater depth, let's say even doing a degree in music or performing it professionally, can be a very good addition to your profile, and that is something these universities value. So they are looking for holistic profiles where the interpersonal skills are great and the student has the leadership capabilities. So, like, participating and taking leadership positions in your school, let's say positions like head boy, head girl kind of thing, doing well in Olympiads,
Mm-hmm.
pursuing an activity and showing that you have really built a community project, or maybe you have built an app if you're interested in technology, or done a research project, or have a very good portfolio if you're interested in creative careers like arts and music. So those things really matter a lot, as opposed to the Indian process where we are just dependent on one exam for admissions. So that is something I think students should familiarize themselves very well with before jumping into this process.
Right. So you mentioned that every student profile, the resume that the student create for their international applications, has to go through a lot. Requires academic excellence. Then you have your standardized tests. Then you have extracurricular activities where
And
you
then essays, we forgot to talk about essays,
yeah.
right? Essays
Right.
evaluate the voice component. That is like, if all other things are similar between two students, a
Mm-hmm.
student who's able to express themselves well and has
Mm-hmm.
a particular opinion and has an
Mm-hmm.
interesting voice in their essays will have an edge over the other candidate. So that
Right.
is also crucial. Yeah.
Right. So, see, four components are and very majorly affecting the entire application
Process.
process. And for every student, the journey is different, and every student face some sort of challenges in maybe any one of the segment, right? So, how do you suggest that the students overcome those hurdles in creating a perfect resume that stand out to the application officers and have them get their dream college?
Yeah. So the only key here, Vartika, is to get started early,
Mm-hmm.
because this takes time, right?
Right,
uh, an application committee, admission committees, there are expert at seeing through fake efforts, like,
right.
and that is why if somebody comes to us when they are like starting 12th grade and they have not done most of these things and they say that we are targeting Ivy Leagues, then we tell them that sorry, we can't help you, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not enough time to do those things, right? So this is why we start our programs almost in class 9th, so that we can get some clarity on what the kid wants to do and then start building the profile. And building the profile does not mean doing some artificial things, to be honest. That's why
Mm-hmm.
introspection is a very important part. You first introspect what the kid naturally aligns to, what would be genuinely a good career for the kid. I think
Right.
this is something we never do in India. And this is something
Mm-hmm.
so crucial, because if you get that part right, then profile building becomes much more easier.
Right.
Like if my nephew is already interested in cooking, then doing cooking related community project can be more interesting or helpful than he trying to do a Olympiad, for example. So based on a kid's profile, then you choose that, like, what kind of activities will make sense for you. Go deep in your interest areas and build a portfolio there. And of course, keep an eye on the grades. You can't mess up your grades. So that is something important. And again, like if somebody has messed up their grades in 11th, it's very hard to come back from that. So this is why become aware of the process from class 9th itself. Then you have good time to build a profile which can be competitive for these schools. That's the only key.
Right. So, which class do you suggest is the right grade to start in with all the
I think
things?
ninth I
Nine.
feel is a good grade. Till 8th, anyways, like, let the kid first like be in the natural
Explore.
environment, do whatever they're
Yeah.
naturally inclined to. From 9th you can start this introspection part. So like
Mm-hmm.
at 24 North Star, what we do with grade 9th and 10th, we do the career clarity part, that let's figure out what are the good careers for this kid, and
Mm-hmm.
then start building some projects in there to see
Okay.
how the kid is responding to those. Because 11th and 12th you hardly have 1.5 years, and you all that time just goes into applications, and figuring out what countries am I going to, what universities will I be applying for, getting the recommendations from the school, getting your school counselor on board, and
Mm-hmm.
just focusing on grades, etc. So 11th and 12th is more about applications. 9th and 10th is the sweet spot. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have decided by then that you want to study abroad, 9th and 10th is a great time to start building your profile.
Right, right, right. And if we talk about students determining what is the right fit for them in terms of college, let's say they have decided the country, and usually when I interview students, they apply to US, UK, right?
Yeah,
Majorly, right? So
yeah,
both the countries they're okay with. So let's say the country aspect is side, and keeping in mind that students don't apply to just few colleges, they apply to lot
yes,
many colleges, and they do get acceptances which are in bulk.
yeah,
So how do they streamline and finalizing the final college which is good for them?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated thing, right? Because
Right.
US has so many colleges that,
Right.
like, right? So the choice is huge. UK, I would say, still, like, there are much fewer, but in US the number of colleges is so great that, like, to figure out what are the 15 or 20, let's say, that I'm planning to apply to, can
Mm-hmm.
itself take a lot of research work from your side. So that's where I think a good counselor definitely comes into picture,
Mm-hmm.
because based on your preferences, like, are you looking for a tight knit community, are you
Mm-hmm.
looking for a specialized college like Berkeley School of Music, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a more broader general university like CMU, or like, Stanford. So those are some of the factors. Apart from that, of course, financial considerations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, for example, if you're very fixated on financial aid and scholarship, that itself narrows down your choice a lot in US, because in undergrad applications, it's tougher to get those scholarships. So if you really want them, then, like, look at colleges which historically have given, or are at least open to giving some sort of aid, which is a much smaller
Right.
number. So that can be one consideration. Sometimes people also look at, like, my relative stays in California, so I want to apply
Mm-hmm.
only to nearby colleges. That can be another criteria. But other than that, I always see that try to visit the campus either virtually or in person. In person can be expensive, I understand, and there's limited time. But if you have family or friends in US, you can ask them to visit the campus and give you feedbacks as well. But these are some of the factors you have to take into consideration. But this is where I think it's fairly complicated, and a counselor can help you.
Right. So, got it, got it. So, what about the standardized test? We know a lot of students do take standardized tests who are planning to study abroad, but then there are students who don't opt for it, considering they would go ahead with the test blind college, which
Right,
are not many in
right.
in number. So, how would you? What do you suggest to students who are, in a skeptical position of deciding on to take the test or not to take the test?
So, in general, if a student comes early enough to us, we always recommend taking SAT or
Mm-hmm.
ACT, and even APs if possible,
Right.
because it just maximizes your choices.
Mm-hmm.
You are then not constrained by which college is test optional, which college is not. So
Mm-hmm.
you can apply to whatever you want if you have taken these tests, because then the field is wide open for you. But if you
Mm-hmm.
have not taken these tests, then, like, you are limited to colleges which are open to taking without that. So we have talked to even committee members in Ivy League colleges, and they say that, even though we say that, like, for example, if it's an international board a school student, right? We technically say that you may not need to take APs, but honestly, the competition is so fierce that we know that taking a AP is very, very important if you want to target Ivy Leagues. So these are these said of unsaid things out there in the admission field, so I would
Mm-hmm.
say it definitely helps to have a good score in SAT if you can. Now I understand that sometimes people have given multiple attempts and they are not able to cross a certain limit. That's okay. But
Mm-hmm.
at least I think if you are starting this process in ninth and 10th itself, you should definitely take it and see where you stand.
All
So
right.
it's highly recommended. Those scores definitely help.
Right. So now that we have understood about standardized tests, there are English proficiency tests as well involved. Uh, to show the students, since India is not an English speaking country. So we have to prove to the people in US and UK that you are eligible to speak English and you can sustain over there, right? So
Yeah.
what do you recommend between IELTS or TOEFL, or is it a choice really of the student to choose between one of them? So how does it go?
So usually the thumb rule goes, if you're very US centric, then TOEFL, go for
Mm-hmm.
TOEFL, and if you're Europe centric, then go for IELTS.
Okay.
That's the unsaid thumb rule. But that said, a lot of colleges in US also accept IELTS now. So
Mhm.
if you have some particular reason of taking one of these tests, that's okay too. But in general, for US, we say that, like, TOEFL is more widely accepted, and in Europe, IELTS is more widely accepted.
All right, all right, all right. So, studying abroad is a very costly investment, and
Yes.
we understand under graduation, anyways, the parent would be funding, but to get some sort of relief in terms of scholarship, maybe it could be any sort of scholarship. So, what advice do you give to the parents and the students so that they can effectively build the resume to stand out to the colleges to the level where they receive a scholarship, and yeah, yeah.
So one thing that people don't understand about this is the way financial aid works in US is quite complicated.
Mm-hmm.
We have something called need-based scholarships, and we have
Yes,
something called merit-based scholarships.
right.
Now, need-based is when you have to, like, convince them that you do have a genuine need for this scholarship, that you cannot afford it otherwise. Now, there are both pros and cons of that. If you mention that in the application, that I would need a aid, I'm dependent on financial aid, then it's up to the college to reject your application if they think they cannot support you.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's a very good profile, but you mentioned aid and they cannot give you aid, they can reject you.
Okay.
Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. So what I say is that if you can afford it, then don't mention that you need aid necessarily in the application. But if you cannot, then do mention it, because then you are looking only at colleges which can support you financially. So this
Right.
is very important for parents to understand, that don't just try to game the system, mention that, hey, I do need aid, but in reality you don't. So first of all, I before deciding country and everything, I think the budget is something important for parents to discuss. That this is what we have set aside for the education. So now, what are the
Mhm.
countries we can target? Because as we discussed, it varies a lot between Singapore, UK, US, Australia. The
Right.
cost can really vary. So take a country which fits in with your financial constraints. But in US, there are some universities which have given need based scholarships in I think in past, and I think universities like Vanderbilt, Syracuse, Duke University, Colgate University. These are some
Mhm.
places we have heard they have given need based scholarship before. There is something also called merit based scholarship, but this is not a substantial amount, so I would
Okay.
not rely too much on these. So for US, I would say it's very hard to get a good chunk of scholarship at the time of admission itself. But in
Mhm.
US, something works very well, and that is assistantships.
Mhm.
And so this is like research assistantship, teaching assistantship. These are given by the universities itself. They employ students if they
Mhm.
find they match the. For example, when I went to UIUC, I had received no aid, so I took out an education loan before going. But
Mhm.
once I landed at UIUC, within first week itself, I met few professors, and I got two RA-ship offers, research assistantship offers. And research assistantship offer means my complete tuition fees waived, and
Oh,
I was getting paid a stipend.
nice.
So I did not pay a single dime for my education at UIUC, and I was getting paid, which was
That's
enough for my savings. So this is something people don't realize about US, that you can
nice.
also get these funding after reaching US. So
Okay.
initially you might have to show education loan, you might have to go there, but if the kid is hustling and if he's interested in research related fields or something, then these assistantships are can also work out in, let's say, second semester or third semester. So decide how it works out for you, what is your financial situation, and then decide the country accordingly.
Right. And can you also talk about the other funding methods where the students can generate or the parents can generate enough money to like send their students for abroad education.
Okay, not sure about this one, Vartika.
The
What?
loans and everything.
Actually, loans and okay. So, so look, 90% of the people who work with me, they have ended up
Mhm.
taking an education loan.
Right.
And even if you can afford it, right, education loan makes sense from tax purposes, right? So people like to take those tax deductions. It makes sense financially. So education loans are very well available now. There are
Mhm.
both like, public banks, private banks, and even NBFCs who give out these loans. So check
Mhm.
them out. There are, I think, lot of options. And if you're going to a very prestigious university, then like Prodigy Finance or etc., there are these financing options which are given only for select few universities, top universities in the world, and you can look at those options. So I think education loan is fairly the norm. Everyone goes for them. So you can look at those. Apart from that, there are external scholarships like Tata Scholarship is there and all, but
Mhm.
in my experience, they are nothing but interest free loans. So
Okay.
you
Okay.
can't rely on them really for financing your whole needs.
Okay, so there is one more element to this, like
Sure.
getting, uh, uh, like waiving off a little bit of your fees, which are AP credits. When you give AP exams, there are
Yes.
college credits that you get, and then you
Yes, thanks
sort
for
of waive
reminding
off.
me.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So those are some things that yes, when you give AP exams and so these are college level subject tests conducted by college board. And if you get a very good marks in these exams, then you might get credit for them when you are
Right.
attending college. So then you don't have to take those subjects. Those credits are already taken, so you can save money on
Mhm.
those credits. You're right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So this is a standard question that we get from students. By if we take AP exams, we do get college credits, but do the college credit leads to the fee waiver as well for that particular course that they have done in the APs?
Right. So, yes, this is a very important topic, and I think
Mhm.
not many people know about this. So, let's definitely discuss it. So, yes, AP exams are helpful in the way that, like, they are college level courses. They're considered
Mhm.
as college level courses. And as we know, so the degree, the way it works in US is each college is equal to finish college, you need to complete certain number of credits. For example, at NYU, you need 128 credits for a
Mhm.
bachelor's degree and so let's say each subject could be like 3 to 5 credit kind of a subject. So now if you do very well in an AP exam, um, you can show that you have already cracked this level of course, and so if it's a required course for you in college, you can get a waiver on that. And
Mhm.
when you get a waiver on that, that means you don't have to pay a fee for that course.
Right.
Those credits are already allocated to you. So that is how it can transfer to a monetary benefit for you. But this
Mhm.
said, every university has a different policy on the AP and credits, how they accommodate it. So you will have to check with your colleges. This mean
Yeah.
that there is no standard way this work, but like it's definitely like the primary benefit of doing AP exams is in the form of college credits. If you pass, for example, 4 AP exams with high scores, and you could earn like 12 to 18 credits for those courses technically, which is almost a semester worth of work. So if you have taken enough AP courses and done very well before application itself, you can save on some courses in college.
Okay. So when we have students here at Utella, we see the dominance of US over other countries. So what is that factor that stands out for USA other than comparing it to different countries? Why is US chosen more over other countries?
Right. So we talked about the social and overall professional benefits of US, but let's talk about
Mhm.
the education system also, because there's a very important point there. The way education system works in US and the college system. So you don't have to declare your major in the
Mm-hmm.
first year itself. So it's a more open degree, and first year you get to take more diverse courses from different backgrounds, and then the student can decide, hey, do I want to do engineering, hey, do I want to do economics or arts. So
Mm-hmm.
a student does not have to declare their major till the end of second year, which is, I feel, is a huge deal, right? Because
Yeah.
in India, once we have I mean, in 12th itself, the student has to decide whether to go for Bachelor's of Engineering or
Right.
MBBS. Chalo, MBBS is different, but like, let's say
Mm-hmm.
Bachelor of Engineering or Bachelor of Arts or Commerce, right? But it does
Mm-hmm.
not work like that in US. You can decide that up till your second year. So you're taking all these courses and then you decide what you want to major in. And it's
Mm-hmm.
possible to do major in science with a minor in economics. It's possible to do a double major
Double
in
major.
business
Uh-huh.
and tech. So the combinations are endless. So I think this works very
Right.
well for new age careers, especially as
Right.
we are seeing AI and automation are just changing the way everything works. The careers are evolving. So I
Mm-hmm.
think this sort of interdisciplinary education can really benefit US students. So that is one
Right.
significant advantage. We don't see this in India, we don't see this in UK, and I
Not
don't
at
think
all.
not in
In
Australia,
India, not
Canada
at
as well.
all. I
Yeah.
was always keen. I was always an artistic student, but I also wanted to do marketing for the longest time.
Yeah. See,
And
right.
I had no way of pursuing both of
Yeah.
them together. So
Yes.
this has been the issue with Indian, yeah, it is like that because you get admitted basis on your major. You don't get admitted to a certain college. You
Exactly.
get
And we
admitted to a
expect
certain
a
course.
17-year-old to make their life choice,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
that is the biggest plus point I think about US. I think in
Yes.
UK also works in a similar way where you have to pre-decide your major before you step into
UK,
the
you have to
college.
pre-decide. So UK,
Yeah,
India, they are similar.
yeah,
US
very
only
similar.
is, I don't think any such flexibility occurs in any other country. So that I think
Right.
is a very big plus because, like, let's say I entered engineering and I know because I coach students in young professionals also. I see so many
Hmm.
people, they did just engineering because they were supposed to do engineering in India. They did not
Yeah,
really enjoy it. But now you can't change it once, even after 2 years, they can't switch to something else without again going for an entrance exam or starting from scratch. But
right.
in US, you don't waste those 2 years. You can
Right.
decide.
And also, when we see in India, a lot of people not liking their jobs because
Yeah,
they were forced to do
yeah,
maybe be a doctor because the dominance of these two profiles is major.
yes. There
It's
is a
like
lot of social
you are
pressure.
pre-decided.
Yeah,
It's pre-decided by the parents. No, they
yeah,
have to be an engineer because the success they see in both the fields is massive. So
yeah,
they want their like children to be successful. So they end up asking them to pursue the particular course and not
yeah,
focusing on what the child wants to do.
yeah,
So
yeah,
the studies in US can both fulfill the student and the
yeah,
parent with the
yeah.
dual course that
Definitely.
they
I mean,
offer.
Indian challenges and so many good students I know, they are high caliber students, but they
Right.
cannot go through this whole JE preparation. It's just a
Right.
different deal.
Mhm.
But they have this holistic profile and they can get into institutes like MIT. So
Mhm.
it's great that now we have those options. And I highly encourage parents and kids to start thinking about this from class ninth itself, because then
Right.
you get a clarity and then you can create a plan accordingly. Yeah.
Difficult. Right. Amazing. Amazing. So, talking about the students, like the students went to the country, so how they can seek for support, fitting into the country and, getting accustomed to the culture that is there in the city of the university that they're in.
Right. So again, this I would say varies a lot from personality to personality of the kid also. Like some kid thrive in that kind of environment where they are getting this new exposure, a lot of things are happening, they automatically bloom in that. And some people who are very shy or reserved, they
Mm-hmm.
may this kind of environment may make them uncomfortable initially. So I think it's very important for the parents and counselors to understand the personality of the kid so that you
Mm-hmm.
can prepare them accordingly. Also, I feel it's very important that the decision for study abroad has to come from the kid himself. You
Right.
can't force them you for your own reasons, because if they are not able to adjust to that kind of social and cultural change, then we have seen a lot of problems sometimes. So first of all, I would say that parents, counselors and kids should work very closely in this together and determine what's the right step for the kid. And if the kid is
Mm-hmm.
not feeling prepared, I think best you can do is, like, as I said, visit these countries, spend
Mm-hmm.
some time in them, and see how the kid is responding to those. For example, my nephew recently visited Princeton University, University of Maryland, etc. and he really liked the US culture. So he's
Mm-hmm.
very driven to, apply for his college applications. And I know somebody else, another client also. He's doing his bachelor's from Drexel University and
Mm-hmm.
absolutely thriving in there. Although he's from,
Nice.
a tier two town in India. And sometimes we see people going from tier one. If the expectations are not aligned, then they have that adjusting issues. Sometimes we have seen parents go there and live, the mother lives sometimes with the kid for initial while, or
Mm-hmm.
encourage the, if kid is feeling overwhelmed, do seek support from a therapist or counselor. The good thing about US I like is they are very open about these mental health issues as well. Every school has a good team of counselors
Right.
and therapists. So if at all you see your kid is not responding well, I think you should immediately seek help. It's very widely accepted in those countries, so there's no taboo around it. But I think parents are the first point of support. So do work closely with your kid and see how he's responding to these things. And
All
also,
right.
whether you want to go in a small town like Urbana, Champaign, where I
Uh-huh.
was. So I studied in Urbana, Champaign, which is, let's say, a town like Roorkee. So
Okay.
it's a university town,
Yeah.
University is the predominant thing there, and mostly you see students. And then I did my MBA from New York, which is
Mm-hmm.
you feel like it's an
Yeah,
ocean and
totally
you are a
different.
small
Like
drop.
being from Roorkee, then coming to
Yeah,
Delhi or
yeah,
Mumbai.
yeah.
Yeah.
So even those two environments are very different. See what your kid is more naturally inclined to
Mm-hmm.
and choose colleges accordingly. So
Right.
college selection is very, very crucial.
Right. Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
So with this, we end the podcast. Thank you so much, Nishta, for being here and giving us such great information. I think it'll be
No,
very useful
thanks,
for you.
Vartika. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
And so thank you for hosting me. And I hope today's conversation helps out some families out there in making the right decision.
Yes.
And of course, feel free to reach out to us if we can help
Of
with
course,
anything.
of course. So, if you have any parting words for the students and the parents, especially who are listening to the
Sure.
podcast, yeah.
My advice is just start early because it's a very time consuming and complicated process. So the best thing you can do is give yourself time to understand the process and also do all the things which are required. So starting from ninth is what we recommend. And of course, if you seek professional help, it is advisable, but do a good research before choosing a counselor. Make sure they are giving personal time to you and make sure they have the kind of results that you're looking for. But in those cases, counselors can definitely help. But even if you want to do it by your own side, try to start early because there is a lot of tick boxes to be checked.
Right, right. So, with this, we end our today's podcast. Thank you so much, Nishta, once again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vartika. Thank you.
All right. So I hope you like the podcast. What were your parting notes? Or if you have any more questions, you can comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And also share with all the friends who are looking to study abroad and maybe want to seek help for their counseling. And with this, I bid you goodbye.